On my channel, I teach a lot of mathematics, and one of the most common questions I get, and I have had over the last 10 years of tutoring, is do you actually use mathematics in real life? And the emphatic answer to that is yes. I am not going to claim that every single square root or every single obtuse angle is used in real life commonly, but for me, the number one area in which I use mathematics is percentages, specifically compound interest. In fact, an understanding and appreciation of compound interest can radically change not just your life, but potentially your bank account. This video is not going to be about calculating compound interest. I've done a separate video on that. This is going to be about the real life uses of compound interest that makes money. Now, I believe I am legally obliged, but I'm going to say it anyway. This video is for entertainment purposes only. I am not an official qualified financial advisor, so just treat this as information more than advice. Yes, I got a perfect score in the quant sections of the GRE and the GMAT, but that doesn't mean you have to listen to every single thing I say on finance. So take everything with a grain of salt. All the advice I give though, I do follow myself. I'm not a hypocrite. I just want to give you the information I have and then you can make up your mind. There are three things I really wanted to get across with this video. And the first thing is, when you see graphs of compound interest, which I'll show you in a moment, at first it looks pathetic. You'll look at the interest and you'll be like, what's the point? Why is Philip so excited about compound interest? It barely makes any difference. It's pathetic at first, but then give it time and you will see that compound interest becomes absolutely phenomenal. Second, compound interest isn't just an abstract thing, it's something you can actually benefit from through stocks, and we'll be talking about that in this video. As part of that, we'll be talking about the trade-off between risk and reward, volatility and returns. And thirdly, perhaps most importantly, I just want to strongly recommend everyone watching this to start saving, or save more than they do already. And that's not a boring thing to do that requires huge amounts of self-discipline. Saving really can equal instant gratification, and we'll be talking about why that is. Before I get to real life examples, I wanted to make two quick points about compound interest. What it is, for those who are not quite sure, and a lovely example from ancient times to show how powerful it is. So what is compound interest? Quick example. Imagine you have £100 and it's going to grow by 10%. Now you might have before imagined that £100 in growing by 10% would go up £10 and then £10 and then £10. No, that's simple interest. The world 99 times out of 100 uses compound interest. And the difference is that 100 does grow by £10 in the first year, but in the second year, it grows by £11. In other words, the 10% is calculated from the total of 100 plus 10, not just the initial 100. And that's why it's called compound interest. The whole amount grows by 10%, not just the original. And so you can see the amount that it grows by gets bigger and bigger and bigger. What's my example that comes from ancient times? Well, I've got a question for you in this month of January. If I offered you $1 million as one option, you're very grateful, I can tell, or I offered you 1 penny on January 1st and 2 pence on January 2nd, doubling every day until the end of January, which option would you pick? Now, this is an ancient example, but the right answer would be the doubling of the penny. And that shows you how compounded growth can be incredibly powerful if you give it a little time. You'd make over $10 million with a doubling penny, but just $1 million with a straight lump sum. That seems so crazy, right? Because you just started off with a single penny. In the first week, you're making just a few pence, 1p, 2p, 4p, 8p. It's the second week, or more importantly, the third and the fourth week, where you make loads of money. And that's the point of compound interest. It's pathetic at first, but then phenomenal in the long run. I am using this compound interest calculator from calculatestuff.com. And I'm assuming that that we start with an initial investment of absolutely nothing. Because we can't all inherit hundreds of millions of dollars, let's pretend we start with absolutely nothing. And then let's imagine that we're able to invest $200 every month by tightening our belt and putting that money into an investment. And let's say that we get an interest rate of 7% after inflation. Now, I'll be talking much more about that figure in a moment, but for now, let's just assume we can get 7% returns. And let's say we do this for 20 years. We don't, of course, have to do it for 20 years. This is just for illustration. And there's 3 things I want you to notice from the resulting situation. Here is a graph of the growth. On top in grey, we have the interest that we're getting and that we've cumulatively earned. And on the bottom, what we've invested, what we've put in ourselves. The first thing I want you to notice, if we look at the investment breakdown, is that in the early years, the compound interest is pathetic. $90 of interest on an investment of $2,400 in an entire year. What's the point of that? You could just get $90 by working an extra day at work or something. What's the point of $90? Even in the second year, $260. That's nice, but it's not going to change your life. So why am I so enthusiastic about compound interest when it seems to make such a little difference? Because we have to give it time. Look what happens after 10 years. The amount of interest that we're earning, quote unquote, after 10 years is more than what we're actually investing in that 10th year. In other words, our account is giving us more money for free than we're putting in ourselves. And that's after just 10 years. Then look what happens after 18 years or so. The cumulative interest that we've made is more than the entire amount of money we've invested over all those years. The point I'm trying to make is that compound interest seems pathetic in the first year, maybe in the second year. But by the 5th year, 8th year, 10th year, 15th year, it can totally transform your life and transform your bank account. Or going back to the graph, look at it visually. Look how the interest starts to take over after about 8, 9, 10 years and then completely dominates towards the end. That is the secret of compound interest. It's not about the first year, second year, or even third year. It's about the 5th year, 10th year, 20th year. That's when you'll see a huge dividend from applying compound interest. Obviously, this advice seems more targeted at those in their 20s and 30s. But even if you're 45, 20 years from now, you're still going to be working possibly. At 65, you want to enjoy yourself, go on holidays, be secure. So 20 years from now, unless you're maybe 90 years old, is still a very viable point in time. And as someone who remembers being a teenager vividly, time does happen. Eventually you will reach 40, you will reach 50. I know it seems like an impossible future that you'll never reach and there's no point saving for. But trust me, time does happen. You will reach that age. 20 years from now will happen whether you like it or not. Now here, I've been fairly conservative and talked about 20 years of investing. But if you're say 30, then 30 years more of investing is very viable. Let's change things ever so slightly and imagine that we have 30 years of investment and that we can invest $300 a month. What happens? You will see that the interest becomes utterly dominant. We are talking about $300 a month becoming over $350,000 by 2049. That's just a crazy return because of the effects of compound interest. I'm going to talk later in the video about why you should save, even if you don't care about 30 years from now. But I just want to quickly say that you can derive instant enjoyment from that 30-year investment strategy. Just from that peace of mind you'll get knowing your future is more secure, you can instantaneously enjoy what you're doing even while you're still 20 or 30. But now I want to talk a bit more about how we might get that 7% compound interest. I'm now going to dive into where I got that 7% figure from. But first, I'm going to start at the bottom. Have you looked around instant savings accounts from the banks in your country? You'll often notice the rates they offer are around 2% or 3%. And the reason those rates are fairly low is because it's guaranteed. In most countries, your money is protected by the government. But there's a problem with putting your money into those kind of accounts and only getting 2 or 3%. There's a thing called inflation, which many of you will know about, which historically averages 2 or 3% a year. And that just means your money is 2 or 3% less valuable each year. So a savings account that offers you 2 or 3% is only matching the historic rate of inflation. So you're not really gaining anything. At this point, it's really important to point out, if you just keep your money in a checking account, which just has 0% interest, your money is actually getting less and less valuable. It's the equivalent of having your money underneath your mattress. It's not staying the same, even though it seems safe and under your mattress or in your bank account. Because of inflation, your money is getting 2 or 3%, in some countries much more than that, less valuable every year. Of course, we all have to have some money in our checking account just because of day-to-day necessities. But the point stands. The more money that's in there, the more it's eroding over time. Next, and I'm massively oversimplifying here, we have bonds, which are usually, but not exclusively, offered by governments, so they're safer, and historically have returned 5 or 6%. Now that's much better, we're definitely outstripping inflation, but the returns definitely aren't 7%. 5 or 6% minus 2 or 3% doesn't get us to 7%. You can probably tell what I'm getting to. Stocks, the stock market. According to many sources, for example this article from NerdWallet, the historical average return from the stock market is about 10% over the last 100 years. Now there's huge volatility in that figure. The returns from the stock market will rarely be exactly 10%. Some years it might grow 20%. Other years it might fall by 30 or 40%. Look at the financial crisis of 2008 and the dot-com bubble of 2001. It's definitely not a guaranteed return. There's a huge amount of volatility, which means like variance year by year in the stock market. This 10% figure is just the historical average over the last 100 years or so in America. Sadly, in my country of Britain, the average is a bit lower at 8%, but in countries like India, the average is a bit higher at 15% or more. It will vary in your country and depending in what part of the stock market you're invested in, of course. If we take that American figure of 10%, take away the inflation rate of 2 or 3%, and we get the magical 7%, which is what Warren Buffett, for example, imagines that the average return will be in the near to medium term. Before you get too excited, nothing is guaranteed in life. We can only base our decisions on what we know. That 7% after inflation is not guaranteed. The Japanese index is still lower now than it was in 1989. So endless growth is not guaranteed. And obviously we live on a finite planet, so nothing is guaranteed in the future in terms of economic growth. But I think the right way to react to unpredictability isn't to curl up into a ball and never take any risks. You just take smart risks based on the available information. And then if things do go wrong, you can say, well, at least I made the right decision based on the information available. Speaking of our planet, I recommend SRI funds, which is socially responsible investing. Depending on the fund you pick, the stocks that will be invested won't be in tobacco companies, for example, or weapons dealers. So you have an option to pick those funds that match your moral values. Maybe it will be social impact investing, which invests in schemes to prevent climate change. Whatever it is, you can tailor your investments to match your ethics. For those who associate the stock market with gambling, I can sympathize with your concerns, but for me, it's very different to that. I actually used to be a professional gambler and gave that up and gave the money to charity because I didn't believe in that. But with the stock market, I see it as lending my money to selected companies for them to create new products, new innovations, and for them to give me back the money with an added interest. That's how I see it. Obviously, you make up your own mind, but stock market investing isn't necessarily equivalent to gambling. Many of you watching this at this point will be thinking, sounds great, Philip, but having all my money in the stock market seems way too risky, way too much volatility, up and downness every day. And I would say to them, first of all, you don't want all your money in the stock market. You want an emergency fund which will cover 3 to 6 months of your daily expenses in your checking or preferably your savings account. So I never recommend putting all your money in the stock market. Second of all, companies such as Vanguard, which I invest in, recommend a breakdown between stocks and bonds based on how young you are essentially, or when you're targeting retirement. Younger people who have many more opportunities to change their career and increase their income tend to put more of their money as a percentage in stocks and less in bonds, whereas older people or people nearing retirement tend to put a bit more in bonds to have a bit less volatility and a bit more guaranteed returns, although nothing in life is guaranteed. Take this screenshot from Vanguard. You can see that their approximate recommendation for those planning to retire in just 5 years would be to have 60% of their money in equity or stocks and 40% in bonds. Whereas those planning to retire in 35 years, which might be me, I don't know, maybe I'm never going to retire, who knows, I won't even tell you how old I am. But anyway, for those people planning to retire in 2055, you would have, for example, 80% of your money in stocks and 20% in bonds. More risk, more volatility, but on average, better returns. Remember, historically, and there's no guarantee of this, equity or stocks returns about 7% after inflation, and bonds return about 3% after inflation. Or take this guide from Vanguard. There's way too much information on here to take it all in. I just want to draw your attention to a few set of numbers. In the top left, we have a moderately cautious asset allocation, as in way more bonds, less in stocks. This has some upside and some downside. Historically, the average gain, which you can see in the middle, is 2.77%. Compare that to the very adventurous asset allocation on the far right, far more in stocks, and we have an average gain of 6%. But look beneath that figure. You can see the minimum gain, as in the biggest loss that was experienced when you invest cautiously, was only 10%. Whereas for the very adventurous strategy, they had a loss in 1 year of 24%. Can you imagine your balance on screen going down by 24% in a year? That's quite scary, and many people would take their money out. So depending on how you feel about gains and losses of that size, that will determine which asset allocation to follow. But the overall purpose of this video wasn't to give you a detailed investment strategy. First, I just wanted feedback on this kind of new finance style advice that I'm planning for this channel. So if you have gained anything from it, please do leave a like, leave a comment. And second, I wanted to leave you with this impression. Saving money now does lead to instant gratification. With everything I've said, you're thinking, it's great, but I just don't have the discipline to put money into stocks or into bonds or even into savings accounts. I just want to spend it now. Life's too short, saving is boring, requires discipline. I just want to spend now. To those people, I would say you're probably underestimating the enjoyment you can derive now from investing for the future. When you put that money in, it's not like you're not going to see it or enjoy it all the way to the end. You can see your number rising, and you can have that peace of mind right now that your future is more secure. So you already are deriving enjoyment from saving right now. Having an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of daily expenses, plus having money squirreled away for the future, invested wisely, gives you enjoyment now, and it takes away financial stress now. I used to be a lot more financially stressed than I am now, and I know the difference, and it does make a big difference. A bill comes up that you weren't expecting, for $50 or $100. And before you might have been really kind of nervous, but now you're like, it's chill, I've got this, I've got stuff saved, I'm never going to be that much in a problem. So it's a myth that saving is only for boring people. Saving can lead to a lot of fun in the here and now. I've got much more to say about all of this, but for now the video is long enough, so I'm going to draw it to a close. If you have benefited at all from anything I've said, as I mentioned, please leave a like, leave a comment, and if I get enough encouraging comments, I may well try to make this a weekly thing, but we shall see. Thank you for watching.